Hi, everybody. My name is Stefan Moulineux, and I'm the host of Free Domain Radio. I think it's really important to take a few minutes to understand the future of freedom, I would argue, which is Bitcoin and altcoins and related digital currencies. Now, why is this important? Fine question. I would argue that it's important because fundamentally, control over human beings used to be direct control over them, like they were slaves or they were serfs. And now what's happened is the people who are in charge of society, the people who run society, have found it much more profitable and a better camouflage to control money. And through the control of money, they can control people. So like an amateur thief will stick a gun in your ribs and demand your wallet, but a really sophisticated thief will control a central bank and print money for his use and his friends' use, and then stick you with the resulting inflation and have you blame the poor, helpless shopkeeper who is forced to raise prices because there's an overprinting of money. There doesn't seem to be any particular end to this problem of fiat currency, central banking, government control of money and interest rates, and the resulting control of human beings. Hundreds of fiat currencies have been around throughout history. They've all hit the same disaster, with, I guess, the exception of the British pound, which has only lost about 96% of its value since it was first introduced a few hundred years ago. So I think it's really important to understand what digital currencies are, how they operate, and why they're so important. So we're going to focus a little bit on Bitcoin here. There are some other stories that we'll talk about as well. So what is a Bitcoin? A Bitcoin is a networked cryptocurrency. Now, crypto sounds cryptic, but it just means that it is cryptography. It's based on the cryptography branch of mathematics, or the hiding of particular information in special codes. Bitcoins are transmitted from one Bitcoin address to the next in any amount desired with zero cost overhead. You can apply a small cost overhead if you want in the terms of pennies to have it transact a slight amount faster, but it is free. Bitcoin addresses are identified by a string of 32 random numbers and letters. Just like a bank account number, users can have one or many Bitcoin addresses. You can create a new Bitcoin address for every transaction if you want. And if you want to learn how to use Bitcoin, it's very, very simple. You can just go weusecoins.com or trybtc.com. So Bitcoin is software. You download, like an email client, you download it and install it on your local computer or device, and you can send and receive Bitcoins. And the Bitcoin software is designed and written by developers who are publicly known from around the world. And changes are made to the software over time based on fixes and features that are in demand by a consensus of users. No one person or authority can enforce changes. You see how it's not hierarchical, not centrally controlled. It is a voluntary participation of like-minded and talented people to produce something of great value to the world. Now, unfortunately, for those of us who like freedom, Bitcoin has a lot of qualities that government regulators don't like. And it doesn't have qualities that government regulators do like, which is why it's going to be a challenge, and an exciting challenge, to get it adopted in a more widespread way. So how does a Bitcoin come into existence? Well, it's called mining, and what happens is you set up a computer, a series of computers, particularly with good graphics cards, to solve mathematical equations. And a lot of permutations of these equations have to be solved to find the right solution, and this serves as a proof of work performed by this miner. The miner is the machine or the person who's running it. And so it's like you expend energy to dig into the ground to extract gold, and that's called mining. And in the same way, you extend computer power and CPU cycles and electricity to create a Bitcoin, to mine a Bitcoin. Both require the consumption of resources. The processing power of computers that are actively involved in currently mining for Bitcoins is estimated to be 6 to 8 times greater than the top 500 supercomputers combined as of May 2013. Let's have a look at the fees. So recently somebody transferred $6.5 million in Bitcoins for a fee of 6 cents. That's a lot of zeros with a 9% in terms of fees. Let's compare that to PayPal. PayPal typically charges 2.9% plus a 30-cent fee per transaction. Bank wire transfers charge around 3.5%, take 3.5 business days to clear. If you look at something like Visa, you're looking at similar kinds of amounts. So to do this transfer over PayPal would have cost $188,500. To do a wire transfer would have cost over $250,000. Bitcoin can do it for 6 cents. So how do you feel if you're a bank looking at this competitor on the horizon, and is not the next call you make going to be to your personally rented congressman to write interfering legislation into this kind of stuff? So there are third-party websites. It's an open API, such as Coinbase and BitPay service, and they aim to make merchant transactions simpler and link Bitcoin accounts to legacy bank accounts. And they charge 0 to 0.99% for transactions. Bitcoin transactions are irreversible, so there's less risk to senders of fraud or chargebacks. And this is important. The reason that they're not reversible is if you want to send someone back the Bitcoin, since it costs you nothing, if you want that option, since it costs you nothing, you send them back. Somebody sends you a Bitcoin by accident, or you want to reverse the transaction, you send them the Bitcoin back. Because there's not this overhead of transaction fees, you can just do that very easily. And you can put escrow services, which means that you basically put your Bitcoin into a holding cell until a particular condition is satisfied, like some good is delivered or some service is provided, and then it's released. Transactions anywhere in the world are generally confirmed within 10 minutes, regardless of the size of the transaction. It's possible to have confirmed transaction within moments by introducing trusted intermediaries and off-chain transactions that are validated by third parties rather than by the Bitcoin network. So if you're doing something incredibly time-sensitive, then you can, of course, accelerate it. Now, highly regulated money services like PayPal have been unable to connect foreign marketplaces, really remote places. Bitcoin permits those with an internet connection of any kind, previously in isolated areas, to send and receive wealth, creating a truly global marketplace. And look, I use PayPal. I like PayPal, but they have to conform with a huge amount of government regulations and legislations, which is what drives their price up to some degree. Bitcoin is often described as frictionless because of the lack of need for intermediaries, the low fees or no fees, and the speed. The authenticity of transactions are double-checked and assured by the rest of the network. One measurement of the authenticity of transactions is measured by the BRICS index, which estimates that approximately $500 million would be required in order to trick the network and create fake transactions. Not too likely. I'm sure there's better use for $500 million, like funding the US government for about 8 nanoseconds. Now, of course, Bitcoin is not the only pony in the show. The blueprints for Bitcoin are open source. People can make their own modified versions of Bitcoin with different properties, often referred to as altcoins. This opens up the Bitcoin currency to competition, which is kind of what you want in order to keep it moving ahead and becoming as efficient and friendly as possible. If any fundamental problems with Bitcoins are discovered in the future, then users can just switch to a new or existing altcoin. And there are dozens already traded on exchanges. The top 5 in terms of market cap are Litecoin, Feathercoin, Terracoin, Namecoin, and Novacoin. So, you may have a question. It sounds like a whole bunch of digital burping, bleeps and bloops and blurps. So is it real money? Well, that's a question. Let's go back in time to our good friend, shaggy face, ZZ Top Aristotle dude. So, of course, as you probably know, many, many different things have been used as money throughout history, from conch shells to salt to buffalo hides to beaver pelts and so on. And so what is money? Well, Aristotle defined a sound form of money in terms of durability. It's got to last. Portability. You got to be able to carry it. Like if you want to pay for a car in iron, you're not going to need a couple of tons at least. Divisibility, can you divide it without it losing its value, right? You can cut a gold bar in half and it's worth half a gold bar. But if you cut a diamond in half, it's worth a whole lot less. And does it have intrinsic value? So gold, of course, is popular because you can use it for jewelry, and now, of course, you can use it for industrial manufacturing and so on. Other important qualities for money: fungibility, not just something you have to dig out from between your toenails, but what it means is that if you lend someone $10, and they give you back a different $10 bill, you don't care. Whereas if you lend someone your car and they give you back a different car, that might bother you a little. So fungibility and scarcity is really, really important. And so in terms of fiat currency, because what you want to do is not necessarily compare Bitcoin to gold. I mean, we can do that, but it's important to compare Bitcoin to existing government-issued fiat currency, which is backed by nothing, can be printed at will, relies on debt, and all these other awful things. Okay, dollars are durable, they are portable, you can divide them, they have no intrinsic value. They're fungible, and they are certainly not scarce. You don't even need to print them anymore. You can just type them into the Fed's bank account, and bingo, bango, bongo, you've made yourself some wealth and enslaved yourself some poor people. So is it real money? Well, it certainly is more real than Federal Reserve notes. It's more real than the asswipe paper towels of money printing extravaganzas known as modern government currencies. So Bitcoin has all of these qualities. It doesn't have a huge amount of intrinsic value. You could make the argument both ways. And it certainly is true. A single Bitcoin doesn't have alternative uses like gold, but it has intrinsic utility in the same way that if you have a lot of phones networked together, that's a lot more valuable than a single telephone. You can buy things all over the world with it. And having a money that is used elsewhere is not always the best thing in the world. Now, let's say you use gold and you have a gold standard, and then there's some new use that is found for gold that drives its price up. That really discombobulates the system. What you do want to some degree is predictability in terms of the value of the currency, and predictability in terms of its value is useful. Bitcoin is still settling into that. But just because you have a money based on or composed of something that's used elsewhere doesn't mean that it's going to be stable and necessarily better. So Bitcoin versus gold, I think, is interesting. This is from July 2010 to January 2013. It is starting to stabilize out a little bit. Now, since Bitcoin has many of the positive money properties that gold has, and some that gold does not, it's conceivable that the anticipated return of a gold standard will be leapfrogged by a cryptocurrency standard. Do we want to go back to a gold standard, or do we want to go to a cryptocurrency? Gold, of course, is hard to transport. It's difficult to store safely and so on. It also does get shaved down and so on. Crypto stuff is pretty cool from that standpoint. You can't pay with gold from your phone very easily, but you can with Bitcoins. Compared to gold, of course, Bitcoin easier to transfer, less expensive to secure and storage, easier to verify, and much easier to granulate, to slice down into tiny little bits. You wouldn't want to buy a piece of penny candy with gold, but you can do that with Bitcoin, because it doesn't really matter since there's no overhead to the paying or selling of things through Bitcoin. You could make it a 0.00000 infinity one if you want. So there are some economic theorists who are making the argument that the traditional definition of a tangible asset may need to be updated. Now, since Bitcoin is not tangible in the traditional sense, but meets the standard of being corporeal, it does exist as electricity, as something that is on your hard drive or is on your smartphone or whatever. So it does exist. It's not purely conceptual. It's not like the dream you had last night. It is actually sort of something that exists. Is it tangible? Well, it requires effort to produce. It exists as tangible value on a hard drive, so it's something to be explored. The Aristotelian definitions of money did not, of course, include the digital age. So if you're not particularly aware of Bitcoin, and more than a quarter or half of people are in certain areas, there may be a reason for that, which is that you don't live in a highly unstable banana republic. So what products and services do you typically tend to buy using Bitcoins? So in the country, USA, electrical items like a TV, 28%. Sorry, it's UK, US, 28%. Argentina is 40%, because the Argentina is just a tragic example of a government gone wild. Like in the 1920s, Argentina had the same standard of living that America did, and then they went into the socialist vacuum-baked hell of central planning, and their wealth all went up in smoke, as did the value of their money. They've had to reform the currency many times, so they're very interested in not sullying their hands with the magic, corrosive, rust-based, fairy pixie dust of government currencies. So computer stuff, I'll let you, if you want to pause. Sorry for those just listening to the audio. There is a lovely video here. I'm not going to read off all these percentages, but there's lots of different ways. So, of course, electrical items, computer software and hardware, entertainment goods, DVDs, clothes, beauty items, betting, gambling, and other all important. Oh, just, yeah, I do have Bitcoins. Just, make this clear. I do have some Bitcoins, but I'm going to hold on to them like grim death because I think they're going to be the foundation of significant wealth. A survey of U.S. consumers in May 2013 found that 25% of them had heard of Bitcoin. Another survey found that nearly 40% of Argentinians, where official yearly inflation figures are 10% or more, probably many times more in reality, have heard of Bitcoin. 32% of people living in the UK have heard of Bitcoin. And the word Bitcoin was recently added to the Oxford English Dictionary, and you know you've made it when. The average Bitcoin user, according to a survey of users, is 96% male. I think that's similar to libertarianism. 32.7 years old, if you're a libertarian or anarcho-capitalist. 37%, non-religious 61%. If you have a full-time job, 43%. In a relationship, 56%. So the most common use of Bitcoins, according to the survey, was for gifts and donations. I, of course, as a show that doesn't really sell anything and doesn't have any advertisements, I do take Bitcoins. So it's in the low bar or in the notes for the podcast if you'd like to help out. I really appreciate that. It's also going to put QR code up. As of September 2013, 29% of downloads of the official Bitcoin client software have been from internet connections in the US, followed by China, 10%, and Germany, 7%. In the US, there have been 3,455 downloads of the official Bitcoin client per million capita, compared with a sizable 1,751 per million capita in Cyprus and 697 per million capita in Argentina. The country with the most downloads per capita has been Iceland, who of course took a rather stern, though temporarily helpful stance with their banksters during the recent economic crisis. The largest base of Bitcoin users is in the US, followed by China. China's market cap and volume is growing quickly. Of course, they're in fascistic, semi-socialist remnants of free market hell, so they're interested in that as well. And this is just some statistics you can have a look at. Pause the video if you like. Bitcoin client downloads per capita. This is a logarithmic scale, so it'd give you whiplash if we put it straight. Several new charities and other donation-based organizations have been created based on Bitcoin, and a number of charities are now accepting Bitcoin or have switched entirely in an attempt to avoid government regulations or bank interference. Famously, WikiLeaks underwent a banking blockade and account freezes by PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard under pressure from governments. They now circumvent this through Bitcoin. Free Domain Radio, that would be us. Let me read it for you. Uppercase, no. You can, of course, look at it in the low bar or scan the QR. Bitcoin Not Bombs funnels Bitcoin donations to charities. BitcoinNotBombs.com. Free, FR338, is a medical volunteer charity that now only accepts Bitcoins. Freeaid.com. Bitcoin 100 encourages Bitcoin adoption by offering charities $1,000 in Bitcoin. Bitcoin100.org. Here are some logos. It's like a scattershot of the advertising hard drive. This is all the people who are interested or involved in or using Bitcoins, and you can, of course, pause this, look at it in more detail if you like. So Bitcoin has likely created a significant number of new millionaires. Tragically, I'm not among them. As of April 2013, at least 250 Bitcoin addresses contained a balance of more than $1 million in Bitcoins. As of April 2nd, the address with the most Bitcoins was worth around $13 million. The Winklevoss twins of Facebook fame own millions in Bitcoins and are working to create tradable ETF, electronic fund transfers based on Bitcoin. Several venture capitalist firms have been keenly interested in Bitcoin. In May 2013, a company called CoinLab announced a $5 million investment by Union Square Ventures. Merchant transaction company BitPay raised $2 million from Founder Fund and recently signed up their 10,000th merchant partner. Much of the money that flows into the Bitcoin economy comes through Bitcoin exchanges, which convert fiat currencies into Bitcoins and vice versa. You don't have to mine them, you can buy them, or you can, of course, supply goods and services in return for Bitcoins, how you acquire them. let's look at an important predecessor